Hello and welcome to Story Quest, the show where I overanalyze the stories of video games, whether they were meant to be taken seriously or not. Today, we'll be taking a look at Hey You Pikachu, a Pokemon spin-off game for the Nintendo 64, released way back in 1998 in Japan and 2000 in the US. Within the game, you go on picnics, attempt to whack balls, and dear goodness, that Krabby is massive. Needless to say, but I'm saying it anyways, this game is not the next Mass Effect of storytelling. I had to dig deep to find out what exactly was going on here, but what I found was shocking. Haha! Let's not get ahead of ourselves though, let's start from the beginning. If we open up the game's manual, we can get an introduction to the characters. You'll meet Pikachu in Viridian Forest. Well, that just spoiled everything, why am I even playing this? There's also Professor Oak, who recently invented a device called the Poke Helper and is asked to use you as a test subject in his latest research project. Okay then, wow. Don't you think you should get to know me first or something? Dang. We also have the main character's mother and of course the main character himself, who isn't listed here. On top of that, we also have an entire page dedicated to Pikachu's friends, who are all just various Pokemon that for some reason have a TM symbol next to their name. Okay, enough from the manual for now. Let's go ahead, hop into the game, see if we can learn more about these characters, and more importantly, about the game's story. Immediately after turning on the game, you see company logos, but more importantly, right after that, you see a shot of Pikachu hopping around trying to catch a Butterfree. As you watch this, what becomes readily apparent is Pikachu is a complete dweeb. That twirl move, while incredibly fancy, is not going to help him catch that Butterfree, and it can't jump for crud either. Look, he gets a good 2 inches off the ground. Good job, Pikachu. He chases Butterfree endlessly through multiple different environments, so A for effort, buddy. Also, that guy looks incredibly unpleased with everything. So let's go ahead and start up a new file. After doing so, we get dropped into the bedroom. And we get a wake-up call from Mom. We also get to meet the main character, which is a faceless character who is oddly surprised to hear that his mom was waking him up. I mean, seriously, who the heck were you expecting it to be? We also learned that a test from Professor Oak happens today, and we have a new device he's created, the Poke Helper, which oddly looks like a Pokedex with Nintendo 64 buttons on it. And then our mom ponders what type of test we're about to partake in. The test we are about to take would not be something our mother would approve of if she only knew. Haha, foreshadowing! With that, we set off with her well wishes. We get dropped into the edge of Viridian Forest and greeted by Professor Oak himself. He thanks us for coming, of course, and wait, you mean to tell me Professor Oak came all this way for this nerd in a Pokemon spin-off game, but in the main series, we have to go all the way to Viridian Forest and back on foot to hand-deliver his parcel because he's too lazy to do it himself. Afterwards, Professor Oak expresses that he would like to test us and see if we can learn to use the Poke Helper. Apparently, I need a people helper to help me use the Poke Helper, or something. Professor Oak then explains the test, saying, the test is simple. Just speak to Pikachu so it listens to you. And it is at this very moment that the story of the game begins to unveil itself. On the surface, the story is about a kid and his friendship with the Pikachu and how it develops over time. This is what most people think of when they think about Hey You Pikachu, and at first glance it may seem that way. But what if I told you the core of the story is not the player character, or even Pikachu for that matter? What if I told you the core of the story is actually Professor Oak performing unethical research with you, the player, as his unsuspecting test subject? That might sound far-fetched, and maybe it is, but the more I analyzed the game, the more I was pointed to this conclusion. In the very next line, Professor Oak tells us to face Pikachu and speak to it while holding the Z button. After doing so, a bubble is launched and flies right at Pikachu. From here, Professor Oak pressures us to continuously repeat this. Speak to Pikachu once more. Well, keep talking to it until it comes to you, and so on. This might sound innocent until you read this line right here. Keep hitting it with voice bubbles. Hitting sounds aggressive on its own, but the more important part is the voice bubble itself. Bubble is a very common attack within the Pokemon world, and considering the fact that Pikachu in no version of Pokemon is able to learn the soundproof ability, and that Pikachu often gives incredibly violent responses to these voice bubbles, it's not unreasonable to say when using these voice bubbles we're actually attacking Pikachu. Humans within the Pokemon world can't exactly use bubble attacks, but just so conveniently Professor Oak happened to make a device, the Poke Helper, that allows us to do so. Still not convinced? I don't blame you. At this point it just sounds like Professor Oak is at worst being a jerk. But let's continue. As you continue through the game, you routinely come home, go to sleep, wake up, then go back out to spend time with Pikachu. At first, you go through a predetermined set of areas, then eventually the game opens up and you have more control over where to go next. However, one thing that never changes is Professor Oak's involvement. During the initial areas, he hand guides you through, giving you advice on how to interact with Pikachu, including new voice commands to use with the Poke Helper. And as you progress, Professor Oak slowly becomes less and less evolved, allowing his test subjects to interact on their own. But in all cases, Professor Oak decides when it's time to come home. Or you could say he decides when his research for the day has concluded. But for the sake of argument, let's say everything I said up until this point is true. The voice bubbles do harm Pikachu, and Professor Oak is performing unethical experiments. Why? What's the point? What could Professor Oak ever hope to achieve from watching a kid be violent towards a Pokemon? Well, if you take a look at the world of Pokemon, the answer becomes obvious. In just about any Pokemon game that allows the capture of Pokemon, from Red and Blue all the way to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, even the anime from time to time, when you run into a wild Pokemon, they're often attacked to the point of near unconsciousness and then captured. But oddly, this does not make them hate you. It more often than not makes them your ally, even your friend. In many cases, Pokemon are unwillingly captured but still become friends with their trainer. Friendship is an ever-pervasive theme in the Pokemon universe, even given the violent context of the world. This is not always the case, but more often than not, Pokemon become friends through violence, then show their loyalty by fighting. Professor Oak is a researcher that has dedicated his life to understanding as much as he possibly can about Pokemon. He wants to understand the intricacies of Pokemon psychology. Why do Pokemon respond to violence? How long does it take for these bonds to be formed between humans and Pokemon? And at what level of violence provides the best response? To find an answer, he's constructed an experiment using a device called the Poke Helper, which tracks the number of days spent with the Pokemon and even the number of times a voice bubble is used. Once you realize this experiment is clearly unethical, and too many eyes are on Professor Oak for him to just go out and use the Poke Helper himself. When kids come of age, they often go to Professor Oak for their first Pokemon, and he also gives them advice, so he works with kids quite often, and everyone knows he does. So what better test subject than a wild Pokemon and a kid who doesn't know any better, with a mother who assumes everything is fine because Professor Oak is a well-respected Pokemon professor. It truly is the perfect setup. One could argue that Professor Oak is working with a criminal organization like Team Rocket or something else that is trying to find the ultimate way to capture Pokemon. Maybe he's doing it for his own nefarious reasons and he wants to capture Pokemon for himself. That could all be possible, but I think the most likely answer is Professor Oak is doing this because he just wants to know. He's a Pokemon researcher that has gotten in too deep and wants to finally bring light to some of these unanswered questions. He is even willing to manipulate a kid to make it happen, but this kid is not just a kid. It's you. There is no face to the player character. The camera is always in first person, and every line from the player is within quotation marks, while no other character's is. The game is designed so that you put yourself in the shoes of the player character. You even interface directly with the game using your voice to create the strongest bond possible. From the wording of characters in the game all the way to the instruction manual and quick start guide, Professor Oak talks to you directly. You are taking part in his experiment, and while you are befriending Pikachu, you are also the one harming him. In conclusion, hey everyone, thank you so much for watching the first episode of the new show. I hope you guys enjoyed. Part of me is kind of worried that everyone hated it, but we'll see. If you did like it, be sure to suggest some games you'd like to see on Story Quest. And if you've not had enough Hey You Pikachu, head over to my Scykoh crud channel. That Pokemon card annotation will take you right there. Because in a week or two, I'm going to put up a video on that channel talking about more stuff from Hey You Pikachu, like how the player character might be Ash's father. Or you can click on that annotation, head over to my Scykoh Plays channel where I just did a Super Mario Sunshine No Hover Nozzle Challenge video. So go check them out, subscribe to all the channels if you enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Take care.